Okay, cool. So in this video, I'm going to answer questions, or rather, I'm going to introduce to you what Chanukah is. I'm going to answer questions as to what Chanukah is. During the whole of last week, well, yeah, last week and this week, I've been lighting candles and sharing them, lighting the Chanukiah, and obviously there's a question on what Chanukah is all about. What is it? And before those questions, I was going to share a video anyways. So, to help me grow my channel, you can like this video and subscribe. That's all. That's all I ask. In exchange, that you subscribe and like the video and share it with your friends who are spiritual. Anyways, I hope you're having a good day, and none of these videos are scripted. All of this for me is spontaneous. I hope you are going to enjoy it. More than enjoy, I hope you're going to learn something. All right, so what is Chanukah and why do we have to, not why do we have to, why is it so interesting and why is it so important as far as the Bible is important? Yes, Chanukah is uh, celebrated by Jewish people, but it has a broader importance than just the Jewish people. It touches, Chanukah touches evangelical Christians and especially Seventh-day Adventists in a direct manner. Seventh-day Adventists have a doctrine called uh, the investigative judgment. Investigative judgment. This is the doctrine of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now, why do I mention the Seventh-day Adventist Church? Is because all these questions come from Seventh-day Adventists. And as you know, I'm a former Adventist and I'm a former Adventist missionary. So you guys have to, or rather, this is not an attack on a specific sect of Christianity, but it just brings to light things that I believe every human being should know, especially human beings that are looking and searching for the truth of the Bible, people who are concerned not with a corner of a belief system or a worldview, people that just want to know what the Bible means. So let's go to Daniel chapter 18 because that's where the foundation of Chanukah is. Daniel 8, we're concerned with Daniel 8:14. So people who promoted this investigative judgment, they based it on Daniel 8:14. And I just want to clarify that most, as I've discovered, a lot of pastors in Adventism don't believe this anyways. They don't believe the investigative judgment. They believe that it is damaging to the people, but as to why the doctrine was kept, it's Adventist business. It's none of my business anymore. But I just want you to know Daniel 8:14, what it really is referring to. So we start in Daniel chapter 8, verses 8, to get a little bit of a background. It says here, then the he-goat grew very great, but at the peak of his power, his big horn was broken. It's in its place, four conspicuous horns sprouted towards the four winds of the heavens. So this big horn is not an Indian chief in North America, but it is Alexander. Alexander, whom the world calls the Great, in Judaism, is not called the Great. He's just Alexander. He was lucky enough to have military prowess to conquer the world. So it says here, the horn was broken, meaning he died. Alexander died at age 33 or 30, 32, somewhere there. And what happens? His kingdom is divided into four smaller kingdoms. The interest, the kingdoms that we are interested in is Egypt, which was ruled by Ptolemy. I think his name is written like this. If not, please forgive me. And then we are interested in Judea, which is where this is happening, in the land of the Jewish people, in Jerusalem specifically. Actually, Jerusalem is a land of Benjamin, but in terms of the northern and the southern kingdom being split, that's Judea and Samaria. So here we are interested in the Seleucids. All right, so it says that his horn was broken, and what happens in verse 9? It says, from one of them, meaning the horns, the four horns, emerged a small horn, which extended itself greatly towards the south, towards the east, and towards the beautiful land. What does this mean? It means that one of these kingdoms, which is the Seleucids, it extended itself towards Syria and Baghdad, towards the south, towards Egypt, and of course, the Holy Land, which is uh, Canaan or Canaan. That does not belong here. Let's fix. Ugh, let me just fix this quickly. All right, so he pushes towards Judea, towards the east, which is the sea, towards south, which is Egypt, and of course towards the beautiful land. So this is out of these four generals of uh, Alexander who take over. This refers to the Seleucids. The Seleucids have various kings as well, which I'm going to mention. And then it says this horn out of four, a little horn out of four, it grew as high as the host of heaven, and it hurled some stars of the heavenly host to the ground and trampled upon them. So for us to be able to interpret the Hebrew scriptures, we must understand and know how to think in Hebrew. We must understand Hebrew thought. So it says it grew as high as the host of heaven, which means it exalted itself spiritually. So this king, these Seleucids, they exalted they exalted themselves above the stars of the heavens, which means they elevated themselves spiritually. And then they hurled some stars of the heavenly host to the ground and trampled upon them. In Jewish thought, the stars of the heavenly host are the holy people. These are the priests. These are people who have been made holy through the Torah, through the study and practice of the Torah. When the Greeks came to Judea, the Jews were holy people, the priests were holy people, uncorrupted, but some of them were corrupted by this power, and hence the stars, which means the great people of Judea or Israel, were brought down or corrupted spiritually, and they were trampled upon by the Greek influence. And then it says it vaunted itself against the very chief of the hosts, against God, that is. On its account, the regular offerings were suspended, and his holy place was abandoned. So, what did the Greeks do? What did the Seleucids specifically do to the temple? Before I explain, well, let me go there first. The Greeks imposed a law that the Jews were not allowed to study the Torah anymore. The Jews were not allowed to do the works of the Torah anymore. In other words, they were not allowed to practice Judaism. And the Greeks further started taking over the temple and slaughtering pigs on the temple, unclean animals, slaughtering to their gods. They brought in prostitutes to the temple, and they also built a well, they didn't build, but they made the court, the outer court of the temple, which is the court of Solomon. They made that a military barracks, and of course, Greek Greek soldiers brought in more prostitutes. And the Jews were forbidden from making sacrifices in the temple for 3.5 years, not being able to worship God or study the Torah for 3.5 years. And it says here the army was raised iniquitously against their regular offering. It hurled truth to the ground and prospered in what it did. So this is what the Greek army did, right? They opposed the truth of God and they hurled it to the ground, and they prospered in their evil deeds for 3.5 years. Imagine people of God not being able to worship God for 3.5 years. Then the vision goes and says, Then I heard a holy being speaking, another holy being saying to whoever it was who was speaking, How long and what was seen in the vision last? The regular offering be forsaken because of the transgression. So the transgression is what the Greeks did to the temple. The sanctuary be surrendered and the heavenly host be trampled. It's a question, which means should the status quo continue? And then the angel answers Daniel and says, For 2,300 evenings and 2,300 mornings shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Okay, so what does it mean 2,300 evenings and 2,300 mornings shall the sanctuary be cleansed? It means evening morning is 1 day. Okay, so evening morning is 1 day. Let's bring out the calculator here. Let me just find my keyboard. So the Bible says unto 2,300 evenings and mornings. So let's have 2,300 evenings and mornings divided by 2. That gives us 1,150 days. That's 3 years and a little bit. Okay? Just a little over 3 years. Why did I divide this by 2? Is because in the book of Genesis, it tells us that the day has two parts. Evening, morning, day 1. Evening, morning, day 2. Evening, morning, day 3. So the day is made out of 2 parts. That's why I divided 2,300 evenings by 2. So for 3 years, the Jews could not practice Judaism. The priests could not offer sacrifices to our God. So that's the reason for Chanukah, the opposition of evil. Chanukah opposes evil. Evil that came upon the temple in Jerusalem in the form of the Greeks defiling the temple by sacrificing to their gods. But I want to take you to another verse, another couple of verses, so that you understand why it is the Greeks that do this job. I want you to understand exactly why it is the Greeks that do this job. In the Hebrew language, the Kittim are both the Greeks and the Romans. What's called Greco-Roman in world history, what's called Greco-Roman, in world history are the Kittim in the Hebrew language. In Genesis 10, verses 4, it says the descendants of Yavan, which are the Greeks. Yavan is the father of the Greeks. The descendants of Yavan were Elisha, Tarshish, and together the Kittim and also the Dodanim. All right. So these are the descendants of the Greeks. Let's go to Jeremiah. Actually, before we go to Jeremiah, let's go to Numbers. Numbers 24, verses 24, it says regarding the prophecy of the Westerners coming to the land of Judah to defile worship, it says, ships shall come from the quarter of Kittim, which means from the Greek islands. They subject Ashur, which is Damascus or Syria. They subject Syria, which is Ashur, and they also subject Eber. Eber is a descendant of Shem, the Jewish people. The sons of Jacob are descendants of Eber. they too shall perish forever, meaning the Kittim. What does it mean, they too shall perish forever? This is a prophecy for the end times, that even after the Westerners have done this to the Bible, have changed the Bible, altered the Bible, imposed paganism on the Jewish people, at the end of time, the world that they've created will perish together with them, which means the Western civilization, the Kittim, will perish at the end. It's in the book of Genesis. And then we go to Jeremiah chapter 2, verses 10. It says, just across over the isles of the Kittim, which is the Mediterranean, and specifically the Greek islands, and look, send to Kedar and observe carefully, see it ought like this has ever happened. So we know that the Kittim for real come from where? From the Greek Isles, from their islands, all the way from Macedonia, Greece, all the way to Rome, because the Romans, when they conquer the Greeks, they take on the character of the Kittim. Therefore, the society then is called the society of the first century of our common era in Judea, could be referred to as a Greco-Roman society, because the Romans would conquer the Greeks. All right, so now let's focus a little bit on our scribbles here. Here's some important dates. 333 BC, something happens. The Greeks, as Jeremiah says, and as the book of of Genesis and Numbers say, the Greeks, they conquer Judea. Okay? So when they conquer Judea, the Greeks are against the Torah. They don't want the Jews to study the Torah. Why did the Greeks not want the Jews to study the Torah? It is because the Greeks exist in a world in Hebrew that we call Chokhmah. Chokhmah is a world of knowledge. So the Greeks were all about being knowledgeable, world of knowledge. This is the Western world. This is the Greek world. If you don't know anything, then supposedly you're not succeeding. You don't have a life or a reason to live because you've got no knowledge. Therefore, you're not complete. In the world of the Torah, the Jewish people or the people of Israel live in a world of three dimensions. Chokhmah, which is knowledge. Bina, which is understanding. What does Hebrew mean by bina? It means you don't only know that fire can be kindled, but bina, understanding, can give you the characteristics of the fire, what its composition is, what its effect is on you, what it symbolizes, what is meant to do in your physical body or in your physical world. This is bina, and it implies spirituality. So bina implies spirituality, and da'at, which means da'at also means knowledge, but in this case, da'at is, um, let's say wisdom or uh, hidden meaning. We can say wisdom or a hidden meaning. So the Greeks only live in a world of chokhmah, which is based on the flesh. The Greeks believe in the flesh, in things that are physical. So if you know, then you experience according to the Greeks. But according to the Torah and the Jewish people, you have knowledge, which is important for you to navigate this world and be able to make a living and be able to become someone and fulfill the purpose of your life. But you also have bina, which is spirituality, which means you see beyond the physical. The Greeks especially hated the world of bina, or this dimension of bina, that there is something above knowledge. They denied it. And then, of course, da'at, which is wisdom and the hidden meaning, of what exists. For example, if you go into the world of Christianity, they will ask you, do you believe in God? That question, do you believe in God? It has to do with a with being convinced physically in your mind that there is a God. And then you look for evidence. But that's not the biblical way. In the world of the Bible, God doesn't say, do you believe in me? God says, you must know me, come to know me, get to know me. And once you know me and you have chokhmah, you will have bina and you have da'at, and the both of us will have a relationship and an interaction. So in the world of only chokhmah, where people say, yeah, I believe in something, it's because they believe by hearing and seeing things, then they're convinced, but they're not easily convinced without proof, which is why all the gods of the Western world have to manifest into human flesh. All the gods of the West must manifest into human flesh, whether it is a Greek pantheon, a Roman pantheon, whether it is a pagan belief from Germanic tribes or Eastern people from Asia. The Western world must believe in what they see. By the way, the Asian people, East Asians, are also Caucasians. They are also the same group as the Yavanim. They are also Caucasians. They are white people. Koreans, Japanese, Chinese, everybody in the East, they are white people. And that's why they have a similar outlook on life and religion. God must be seen physically, he must be tangible, and therefore there must be idols or there must be murals or something a person can see. But in the world of the Jews, the knowledge of God is there, and people get to know God and they interact with God through these three dimensions of Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at. So the Greeks hated that the Jews did not have an emphasis on the physical things. They only had an emphasis on the spiritual things. So the Greeks conquered Judea, they attacked the Torah, and they stopped the Jews from worshiping God. Now, you must understand that when the Greeks came originally, when they came to the land of Judea, they didn't come over to kick down the door. They didn't kick the door down. They did not mount an offensive because Alexander, who's called Great in the West, he had a vision of the Kohanim, the priests of the temple. He had a vision of these holy men wearing white robes. And when he landed on Jewish soil and the promised land to conquer it, he was met by the Kohanim, the people of his dream. And so he didn't attack immediately because Alexander had great respect for the Kohanim, but he believed that our Judaism or their Judaism was not civilized, or civilization was not a representation of civilization, and it could not be based on a spiritual world. It had to be based on a physical world. So there was a war against the Torah and the Jewish people, an ideological war. And of course, there was a war to civilize the Jewish people, supposed civilization. There was also an attack on the Jewish worldview, which says we have these three dimensions: Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at, knowledge, spirituality, and wisdom, while the Greeks enforced only the physical. Okay, so there was a complete war, not only on the Jewish people, but on the Torah itself, the Word of God, a war that started in a non-violent way, but it would soon become violent. In 325, something happens. Alexander dies, and then the four generals take over, and the land of Judea falls into the hands of the Seleucids family. But it would not be Antiochus the First who would attack the Torah. All this work of attacking the Torah is done by the fourth Antiochus, Antiochus Epiphanes, or Epiphanes the fourth. He's the guy that eventually attacks the Jewish people, right? So he's the guy that attacks the Jewish people, and spiritually, that is. The first Antiochuses before him, yes, they attacked the Torah, but not as viciously as this guy. This is the guy who stops complete worship for 3 years. The Jews cannot sacrifice in the temple. And then the priests that are called the Chazmoneans, uh, they decide that we have seen enough. After 3 years of not being able to study Torah, we have seen enough corruption. It's time to wage a physical war. So the Chazmoneans wage, who are the priests, they wage a physical war, what's come to be known as the Maccabean revolt. Okay? So this Maccabean revolt and the Maccabees is led by Matthias first, who's the leader of the Chazmoneans, and then it would be his son, Yehuda, who would lead the physical war against the Greeks. So the Greeks are attacked, they are thrown out of the temple, they are defeated by the priests. I want you to understand this is a professional Western army with all the weapons and all the armor in the world, yet they are defeated by some Jewish priests who wore no armor. They had primitive weapons, swords made of brass, and spears that were not perfect. But the reason why they won is because of righteousness and because of their jealousy for the Torah. The Jewish people do not accept the New Testament, not because they don't accept the history in the New Testament, which is, by the way, Jewish, but rewritten by the Romans. They don't accept it because they are jealous of the real Bible, which is Genesis to Malachi, and especially jealous for the Torah. The Jewish people are zealous, number one, and jealous for God's word and their relationship with God. Our relationship with God is more important than any new invention. And so Jews, they can see what's happening in the New Testament, but they cannot and should not accept it because it has been rewritten to change their minds against the Torah and towards a God that can be seen with one's eyes. For example, making the Jewish rabbi Yeshua, who's called Jesus, to become a hero and then introduce a Christology to say that he is God, because once again, in the world of Chokhmah, of knowledge, people want to see, uh, and they have this question that says, do you believe or don't you not believe? The Bible doesn't interrogate us whether we believe or not. The Bible says you must know God, learn God's ways, and then develop what's called emunah. Emunah is trust. It's not faith. Emunah is not faith. Emunah is trust. In the New Testament, the missionaries ask the people around the world to just have faith. They say God works in mysterious ways, have faith. Yet in the Bible, we are given information about God. We have an interaction with God. We have Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at concerning God and the world that we live in. And therefore, we have a dynamic relationship with God. In the Western world, there's no dynamism. They say have faith. And when it matters most, they will introduce a doctrine or some sort of creed to try and prove something. So they live in a physical world, we live in a spiritual world. And so the Maccabees are successful. They throw the Greeks out of the temple and out of Jerusalem into the desert. So the Greek army is not winning here. It lost the war. But something happens when the priests go back into the temple. They find something disturbing. Here we have a representation of cartons of oil, right? So we have 2 cartons of olive oil. In the temple, there were 8 actually, but all of them were not pure anymore. They were defiled. These cartons were defiled except for 1 carton. 1 carton of oil was still kosher. So the priests relit the candles. What did the priests do? They relit the menorah of 7 candles. And here's the miracle of Chanukkah. This kosher carton of oil is supposed to burn for only 1 day. But this carton burnt for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days plus 1. It burnt for 8 days. In the Hebrew language, the number 8 means renewal. So whenever we count up to 8, there's always some sort of miracle. So the miracle of Chanukah takes place on the 25th of Kislev, which in the Gregorian calendar is the 25th of December. In the world of the West, this brings down the greatest spiritual darkness, which is called good. But there's nothing good about Christmas. What happens at Christmas? Lots of road accidents, lots of riots in the world, floods. There's a lot of people being killed. A lot of people being robbed. People don't do business in a trustworthy manner. People are taking advantage of other people. And this is called in the spirit of Christmas good. And yet, at the height of the spirit of Christmas, the temple was what was defiled. And it took holy men to relight the candles of the menorah on the 25th of December so that good can really overcome evil. So on Chanukah, good overcomes evil, light overshadows the darkness of the pagan world. And I'm sorry if I've offended anybody, but you should do your own research. Christmas has a very deep pagan meaning and origin. It's not for the people of Israel. Christmas is for Christians, not for the people of Israel. It is not for Israelites, it is not for Jews, it is not for Hebrews. It is for the people of the world who do not know our God, Yah, like they should know within the confines of Chokhmah, Binah, and Da'at in a spiritual world. So this is the meaning of Daniel 18. Unto 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. After 3 years and about let's see, maybe 3 years and some 3 months. 3 years and 3 months, the Maccabees cleanse, or the Chasmoneans cleanse the temple, and therefore the priests and the rabbis establish what is called today Chanukah. Chanukah means a dedication, all right? So Chanukah comes from a Hebrew word which implies a dedication. In this case, the definition is a rededication. So Chanukah is a rededication of the temple as per Daniel 8:14. So there's no investigative judgment where supposedly Jesus moves from the holy place to a holiest place in heaven. There's no such thing because the physical temple on earth was for the earth. There's no physical temple in the heavens, and this implies that Jesus was the high priest and the sacrifice, blah, blah, blah. That's deep. That's a deep misunderstanding of the Hebrew text. If you want to learn the Bible, you must study it in Hebrew. What you have in front of you in English or any other language, Spanish and Portuguese, is a translation. When you translate Hebrew to any language that is not Hebrew, you lose 80% of the meaning. So by the time you get to this investigative judgment thing, which comes from our Adventist friends, you are deep into idolatry. You are lost. You don't know the meaning of the word at all. And so Daniel 8:14 is Chanukah, the rededication of the temple. And since the 25th of Kislev uh, of that year, Chanukah was instated as a Jewish holiday. The cleansing, to remember the cleansing of the temple. Then the Romans show up. The Romans show up in the year 64 BCE, before the Common Era. They conquer the Greeks, and therefore the Greco-Roman world is born. So the Greco-Roman world is born when the Romans come and conquer Judea. But the Romans are a bit different from the Greeks because they come with violence immediately. Violence, oppression, taxation, etc. And of course, the people, the society of Judea was now Hellenized from the from the Greek occupation. So the Jews had left the world of Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at for a world of Chokhmah only. They assumed the Hellenistic world. Those of you who believe, actually, not those of you who believe, those of you who have read the New Testament, you will hear Jesus saying, I have not come for the healthy, I've come for the sick. And then he'll say, I've come for the lost house of Israel. So his mission was not to be Messiah or God. His mission as a kosher Jewish rabbi was to bring the Israelites of the northern kingdom who assimilated with Assyria or Syria back to the Torah. That's why all of Jesus' disciples were from the northern kingdom in Samaria. And also uh, to call the Jews out of Hellenization, out of the westernization of the Torah in the Jewish world back to the Torah of Moses. That was his job, not to be God or Messiah or whatever. Those things are not true, but he was a great teacher of Torah, a holy man, a tzaddik, but not to be worshipped, not to be looked at as God. He was not the Messiah. He was a Jewish rabbi. He was a tzaddik. So that's what he was doing. He was trying to pull Jews out of Hellenization, out of being lost and back to the Torah. Now, I mention Jesus here because I assume most of you are Christian that are going to be listening to this. So during the times of the Romans, these are now the Romans. What do the Romans do? The Romans are more cruel. They are more cruel than the Greeks. The Romans also don't want the Torah. The Romans don't want the Torah. They don't want the rabbis to be teaching the Torah. The Romans uh, would later defile the temple as well when Titus gets into the holy place, kills Jews upon the altar, and then uh, ultimately sets fire to the temple. So he does his own defiling of the temple. And this defiling of the temple is going to be fixed by King Mashiach. The Messiah, when he comes, he has to kick out the Romans from Jerusalem. What does this mean? It means that the Jews, through Zionism and Aliyah, they have gone back to the Holy Land of our forefathers, but that Holy Land is still in exile because the person ruling the land, unfortunately, are not the Jews, but the church. And so when the Messiah comes, he has to wrestle out of the hands of the Romans or the church. The Romans became the church eventually. Out of the hands of the church, the land and full control and kingship of the son of David will be established in Jerusalem. So when King Messiah comes, he will do a similar job to the Chasmoneans. Now, the Romans, they didn't want the Torah to be studied or taught, so they nailed on the crosses rabbis, okay? At one stage, there were 6,000. At some stage, there were 6,000 crosses outside of Jerusalem. And on these crosses were rabbis who were teaching the Torah. After the time of Jesus, there was a rabbi named Rabbi Akiva who was also killed in the same way. He was nailed to the cross. This is the a Roman way of punishment or execution. So the cross is not a symbol of salvation if you are the people of Israel. If you are a person of the Bible, the cross is not for salvation. It is for murder, torture, and execution. So at some stage, there were 6,000 rabbis all hanging outside Jerusalem because they had gone against the Roman law and taught the Torah. This Jesus, the famous Jesus, is not unique in his crucifixion. He was also a freedom fighter against the state of Rome, teaching the Torah to Israelites and the Jews. So let's look at Jesus's disciples. Who were they made of? The disciples of Jesus were made up of almost all the sects of Judaism, but I want to highlight three. the zealots who were zealous for the land of Israel and against Rome. The Essenes, who saw the land of Israel as now defiled, especially Jerusalem being Hellenized, they decided to go live in the desert. A man called John the Baptist came from these. And then you had the Sicarios. The Sicarios were the Jewish assassins. They were the Mossad of the day, of the first century. What they did is they would sneak up on Roman soldiers and cut their throats as a way of liberating the land of Israel from the hands of the Romans. So all the disciples of Jesus are people who are freedom fighters, and therefore the rabbi himself, a kosher rabbi, was a freedom fighter, not the Jesus you learn about in Sunday school. This is the Jewish one who fought as a freedom fighter. It was not God, was not Messiah. He was a tzaddik, a holy man, and he taught the Torah and nothing but the Torah. And so there you have it. Both the Romans and the Greeks wanted to defile the temple, and therefore it was necessary for the Jewish people to rededicate it according to Daniel 4. Number one, it was rededicated by the Hasmoneans. The second time, when the Messiah comes, when the Jewish Messiah comes, he will, in a way, cleanse the temple from Roman influence, from Roman rule. Of course, ancient Rome doesn't exist anymore, but in this case, from church rule, church influence, church doctrines, and all that other stuff that is not Jewish, that is considered by the Bible to be false worship. And so there you are. That's what Chanukah means. So when we light the candles of Chanukah, literally light the light of God defeats darkness. Does it mean that Chanukah is equal to Christmas? No. Chanukah is not Christmas for the Jews. Christmas in the Jewish world is the height of darkness. Chanukah is the increasing light of God which saturates the world. And therefore, the Jews continue to this day celebrating Chanukah and lighting the candles as you have seen me do on social media. I hope this helps, and I know that it's going to cause you to ask a lot more questions, and I'm ready to answer those questions as well. I hope nobody was offended. If you thought you were offended, I challenge you to go back and read the Old Testament, which is nothing old about it. We call it the Tanakh, the Jewish Bible. Go and read Genesis to Deuteronomy, and then stop. And then carry on with the prophets until Malachi. Even if you're not reading in Hebrew, you are going to get a sense. Even if you're reading from the Christian Bible, you are going to get a sense of what is truly godly and what is not godly, what is light and what is darkness. Hope you learned something.